Well, good morning, everyone. It is a new day. It's Monday, and we are going to be spending a little time today in sessions talking about what happens when a buyer wants to back out after inspections. Sounds really exciting. So anyway, so to get us started, I thought we should talk a little bit about how we practice because while I'm selling the Detroit market, others sell in other markets and even in other states. So Stephanie, talk to us about Florida and how you practice navigating inspections in the state of Florida.
Sure. So in Florida also we have different areas that do different things and practice different
Mhm.
ways. And I'm in the Tampa, St. Pete, Central Florida market. And for us, we use the as is with right to inspect contract. So in that, it basically gives the buyer sole discretion with the inspection. Now I know down in Naples specifically, they don't use the as is. They're using the contract that you can use the inspection. So at that point, the seller has a right to see the report and to fix, the items on the list. So it's not as easy for the buyer to back out in that situation.
Interesting, Stephanie. So a little bit sounds a little bit like Kim Anderson's group down in the Kalamazoo market. So
Mhm.
while the buyer has the opportunity to inspect, we have that little area in Michigan. It's not the way I practice, and certainly not the way you practice either,
No,
Doug.
Right,
But in
right.
Kalamazoo, if the buyer asks for something, the seller has the right to say, show me where it's written, right? They want to
hmm
see a copy of the report and then an opportunity to negotiate through that. So again, not all things are created equal. Most of the time, when you get that inspection report back, the buyer does have an opportunity to ask for repairs. But today is really talking about okay, so now you've gotten it done and we've set up all the expectations for everything, right? And now the buyer wants to back out. So diving down a little bit about what happens before the inspection. And I was wondering, Doug, whether or not you could spend a few minutes talking about
Yeah.
as a buyer agent, as the advice giver, what are the things that you say and how do you prepare your buyer even before writing that offer?
Yeah, boy, that's great that you just said it that way because that's exactly what's important, especially when you're dealing with a buyer that, I mean, maybe this is their first purchase. They don't even know the right, I mean, right things to ask at this point in time, right?
Mhm.
So as you sit down, as you prepare this purchase agreement and have this conversation around inspections, you really want to set the stage. And again, I'm kind of that guy that says, I really want to say, guys, there's no perfect house. We're going to find some things. If you've ever had an opportunity to read a inspection report, which many people maybe have never even seen one, right? These things could be the Old Testament. These could be this thick, this intimidating. They could have a whole bunch of things in it that they don't even know the first thing to ask at that point in time. So I do spend a lot of time up front, even before the inspection's scheduled, even before we've gone to the house, to be able to kind of set in place in the buyer's mind, hey, here's what's going to happen during the inspection. Here's going to be the outcome of the inspection. And here's some of the things that we could possibly challenge the seller on. And so as long as we kind of set that stage as we're going through the house, and I'm a guy that, I don't go to all the inspections and stay 100% of the time. I'm either there at the beginning or the end of the inspection because again, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. At the end, when the inspector's there and they're kind of walking through, what they've seen, you want to be what do I want to say? The calm in the storm. So if people are panicked about what they just saw, you want to be able to kind of put those expectations in place. So again, knowing full well, back to what you just said, Tracy, setting that expectations before the inspection happens as to, again, what our options are going to be as we move forward. So,
Right, good, good. And so I'll ask this one question because it comes up a lot, you know. So you inspect the house,
Mhm.
and going into the inspection, you knew the age of the roof and the furnace. And now the inspector has been there and basically, the veil has been removed and it all looks different now. Everyone's scared. How do you handle those things about, hey gang, like when we wrote the offer, we knew that the roof was from 1992. So this was a known thing at that time. How do you navigate those kinds of questions? Stephanie, you might have some experience in this area as well.
I just actually did have a deal like that, and you know what I think? I think the listing agent knows it too.
Hmm.
So, they've filled out the seller's disclosure. They know how the roof is or the AC is. And I just had one where the AC was old. And the listing agent, when we looked at the house, said, we realized that, AC is old. So that kind of gives you a little, hint right there too. So going
Yeah.
through the inspection and sure enough, the inspector said, yeah, it's at past its life, really. And so we just went in and asked for the credit for the AC in case even if it was working good, even if they had it taken care of and serviced regularly, we still, felt like, okay, but at any minute it could go. So in that situation, and I think the buyer was pretty apprehensive about it and was kind of questioning, should I stay in this or should I not? We addressed it, we asked for it, and the seller agreed. So that kind of told me that they were prepared for it
Hmm.
and everybody kind of was on the same page without giving it right up front.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you said that because I just had one in Michigan, the same thing. It was one of those things that the seller knew the age of the roof or thought they knew. And again, think in terms of those seller's disclosure statements as kind of the seller's best guess, right?
Hmm.
Well, I think it's about 13 years old or 15 years old. And then the reality is when it's inspected, yeah, it's a little older than that, right? So
Hmm.
immediately the buyers panic because it's not what it was said on the seller's disclosure statement. It's a little bit older. But again, back to my conversation of having that upfront conversation with the buyer about, hey, here's what we're going to see. Here's going to be some of the outcomes. Here's the options for us.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
Right.
good,
yep.
good. And what I like is I always try to set the expectation like this. Guys, we've looked at the house
Yeah.
and now we've looked at it with an inspector because I'm there at my inspection. But let me just tell you what's going to happen when I leave. Tonight, when you get home, you're going to get this report. It could be anywhere from 50 to 70 to 80 pages in length. And suddenly, when you see that, this wave of nausea is just going to roll right over you. You're going to be like,
Yeah.
oh, it's going to feel awful. It's going to look awful. But
Yeah.
I'll try to tell them, you guys, I want you to think of this as much of it as your honeydew list that you just paid somebody to do for you
Mhm.
because it literally usually outlines like sometimes it's red, green, and yellow. Red is usually at the top of the report. They're the things that we really have to pay attention to. Yellow is like, hey, these are not immediate, but you should know them. And green is like, you're good to go on these areas. So
Mhm.
as the advice giver, set the stage, be prepared, because what we know is if you haven't had that story yet of the buyer that is on day 8 of their 7-day inspection period and they're calling you and saying, what are they saying? I want out.
I want
Okay.
Hmm.
out. I want
They're
out of this
they're
one.
they're freaking out. Okay.
Yeah.
And we've all been there. Okay. But we
Yeah.
already know that the clock has ticked and the timetable has expired. So
Yeah.
what do you do? What do you do? What do you say to your buyer when you've done all the things? You've given the best advice, right? You've had the house inspected. You prepared them for that report when it comes. But they have now spoken to Uncle Joe and their next door neighbor and their mom and dad that bought a house 30 years ago. And they've a lot that and they've been on ChatGPT. Okay. Because that's our new enemy. But
Yeah.
anyways, what do you do, guys? What do you say? What do you
See,
say to that
Steph.
buyer?
Steph, you gonna hit that one? Go, girl.
Go ahead, Doug. I want to hear what you have to say.
It's always interesting because that's always that eighth day. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? Am I going forward? Am I not going forward? Tracy, I think again, I feel like we're talking about those expectations of what we've said day one was going to happen. And whether it's Chat GPT, whether it's Uncle Joe that knows way more about real estate than the rest of us, right? Again, I kind of come full circle back to the things that it's kind of like eating an elephant one bite at a time. Hey,
Mhm,
let's take a look at some of these things that are coming out of this report, and again, put it in perspective.
mhm,
And again, when I say that to people after even the seventh and eighth day, I will remind them of what we talked about early on in this process. Hey guys, do you remember what happened when we said this was going to happen or that was going to happen? it just really takes down that, what do I want to say, that temperature in the room,
Mhm.
and it makes us think a lot more logically.
And I
Yeah.
think, Doug, like you said in the beginning, when you have the conversation with your buyers and you're saying, okay, you have, let's say, 7 days for the inspection. So anything that we need to research on the house or you want to know, including the inspection
Their
from the home
time.
inspector, is
Their,
in that. And after that, you're
yep.
accepting it. So I think it's just, again, getting the report in a timely manner and
Yep.
letting them know this is the time. And after that, it's not the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. When I'm out showing houses with buyers and say we're showing 5 houses, I always tell them one of my jobs is to be the timekeeper because I've got my little tour and I got my little schedules like this. So we got to be indoors at the times we said, right?
Mhm.
The
Good.
timekeeper place of your job does not end when the buyer's under contract. You are the timekeeper of the timetable dictated in that purchase agreement. So as the days of inspection are ticking along, you're also ring ring. Hey, I'm just calling to check in. Today is the day after inspection. Did you have questions about the report? Start setting the expectations as to what is going to happen next. What are the things that were in the report that you have questions about? Do we need to get out our magnifying glass and do a little bit more investigating? Are there calls that need to be made? Because you are the timekeeper.
I
And
like that.
if
Yeah, I
What's
like
it?
that. I'm writing that. I'm using that one.
Right, right. I always say I'm the timekeeper, I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
we gotta
yeah.
go, everybody, we gotta go, we gotta go.
No, no, but
But
what you just said, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but what you just said about keeping that, if you are the timekeeper, it's very important that how often do we see it that that time just slips and slips and slips, and all of a sudden it's like they're calling saying, "Hey, wait a minute, tomorrow's day 7 or day
yeah,
10,"
yeah,
and it doesn't give you the time to do the due diligence that you need to do. So
yep,
I
exactly,
like it. I like
exactly.
it.
So a couple things. So another place I want to go with this is this. Now I'm wearing my listing agent hat. It's right here on the top of my head. It's my listing.
Hmm.
And I'm the timekeeper because I'm always the timekeeper. And I just realized today's day 6, and I have not heard from the buyer agent to schedule the inspection. But they have 7 days in their purchase agreement. What do you do? I've handled this wrong before, in that I'm like, hey, they haven't called, man. This ain't on me. But guess what? It's on me because I also am watching the clock.
Yeah,
And what happened the last time is they called the day after inspection period was over and wanted to inspect.
yeah,
And let me tell you, I felt like it was totally my fault because I was watching the timetable and thinking, well, it's not on me, it's on them. This is their purchase agreement. But at the end of the day, if I had engaged the day before, I was then setting a better expectation for everyone. And the last thing we want to do is, so in this case, we did decide that we would let them get in and inspect. Because if we didn't, then we were going to have to I don't remember if we had buyers behind us in that transaction or not. It was so long ago. But let's say there wasn't a buyer behind that person. Now we have to go back to market. We have to find another buyer. We have to agree on another purchase agreement, right?
yep,
That's the last thing you want to do. So
yep,
as the timekeeper, whether you are on the list side or whether you are on the buy side, you are the timekeeper. You have a responsibility. Whether you're Doug Hale and you got your file up here, you pull it out, you write right on the top of that file what's happening. If you're
yep,
using a closing file checklist, you should, a buyer to close checklist, you should have that written on there. If you're using the checklists that are set up inside of Dotloop, you should have it written there. So reminders pop up to remind you about what's happening. So this is not all on the buy side. You are the advice giver and the timekeeper on the list side.
yep.
So
Tracy, I want to echo what you just said. Sorry to move your
yeah,
thought there.
no.
But what you just said about that, often in broker support calls, we get that the day
Mhm.
before the inspection period is ending. Hey, it's not my responsibility. They've got 7 days, Doug. And,
Mhm.
if it goes beyond the 7 days, then they're just buying the house as is. And we just keep going. No harm, no foul, right? Wrong. Bottom line is, I'm very much like you in my practice. I want to make sure day 6, I'm picking up the phone. I'm saying, hey guys, just a reminder, tomorrow's day 7. And
Mhm.
lots of times, if you're dealing with an agent that's pretty new in the business, they're like, oh my word, what
Mhm.
what happens now, right? And
Yeah.
so It's super important. It's still on you. You're representing the seller. You don't want to go through some of those things that you just said. Now we'd have to go all over again, start with, I mean, it's just a nightmare at that point in time. So I like the way you phrased it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think too, scheduling, if you're once you get that contract, you have deadlines, escrow deadlines, inspection deadlines, clear to close, all of those things should just be automatically put into your calendar. So when you see your calendar every day, you're like, oh yeah, I got to check on this and follow up. That's what's important. And as the listing agent, it is just as important because the whole, goal here is to get the thing closed.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
it doesn't stop just in your area if you're the
No,
listing agent.
exactly, exactly. Scott, I'm going to have you hold your question to the end, okay? And then we'll take all the questions at the end. Um, Okay, so let's just shift back to the buyer for a minute. Um, I had a client, his name is Anthony, and he had gotten a bunch of cash from his grandpa when he passed, and he was going to help him buy a house, and he was buying a house in Ann Arbor, which was this is probably at least it was before COVID, so maybe in 17, 18, 19, I don't remember, but he had very unrealistic expectations about what it looked like to be a buyer.
Mm.
And no matter what I tried to say to him or the advice I tried to give to him, every time we wrote on a house, it was like, okay, here's the list of demands for the brand new house the seller is going to give me. Okay. And I'm like, and so each time I probably wrote three or four offers for him. And like I would get calls from listing agents literally yelling at me. And I'm like, look, don't shoot the messenger, please. I'm the writer, but I just do what I'm told because I give advice, they give direction, right? And if his
Yeah.
direction tells me I want a new roof and three new windows and a new furnace and whatever,
Yep.
that's what you write. This is their home. And so I just, that's what I did. So at the end of the day, each time he wanted to back out, and this is before the inspection contingency was up. But at the end of the day, I ended up parting ways with him and just told him that I wished him the best, but that
Mm.
I knew that I was not going to be the person that was going to help him get to closing. And he's actually the only person I've ever let go as a buyer. And because sometimes it just doesn't work. If you just know you don't have the ability to get this person to closing, it's never going to work out. And I was always the bad guy. He felt like I wasn't working in his best interests. So at the end of the day, be a really good listener, read the room. You know how to give advice that is your job, and be watching the timetables like crazy. Now, one thing on the list side, when you're wearing that listing agent hat, Doug and Stephanie, are you, when you're on the list side and you're 3 days under contract, are you calling the listing agent to ask about the earnest money deposit?
If it hasn't been made, I'm absolutely asking. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to echo that 100%. Yeah, three
Okay.
days, 72 hours. They better be,
Hmm.
and you make sure it's deposited. It can't be a picture of a check that they just
Hmm.
sent to you to satisfy the seller. You want to
Hmm.
verify that that money is in the bank. So
Okay. All right. Then, Stephanie, what is the purpose of wanting to have a copy of that deposit, the proof? Why do you want to have that? Why is it important?
I want to have it because I want to make sure that those timelines have been met, that it
Okay.
has been actually, made. So,
yeah.
and for us in Florida, typically it's just directly with the title company. We don't handle any funds in office. So the title companies down here are really good about giving that proof of earnest money. And so if I'm not seeing that by day three, I'm looking for it. And yeah, I keep it as part of the file in dot loop.
Okay. Okay. So, Doug,
Yeah.
um, your buyer calls you and says he wants to back out of a transaction, and it's day 10 of a 7-day inspection period
Mhm.
because something's happening. What was the word you used earlier, Stephanie, when we were talking? You said buyers, what do we call it?
Remorse.
Buyer's
Buyers
Buyer's remorse.
remorse.
It's real.
Buyer's remorse. All of a sudden, something happens for the unexpected reason, right? That they just simply say, and we're beyond the inspection period, right?
Yep.
Well, what happens then, right? Are we going to chase this? Or are we going to get to that point? Obviously you can request it. There's no guarantees at that point in time. You've
Mhm.
gone beyond that 7-day period, right? Thank heavens I haven't had that happen but twice in my professional career, so I really don't have a whole lot of expertise there other than, man, you've gone beyond that 7 days.
Hmm.
And that 7 days was in writing. Everybody agreed to it. Now we're to the 10th day, and you're trying to say, hey, for whatever reason, legitimate or not, I always love when Don Phelan loves to say things like, well, then the man in the black robe is going to have to make that decision as to who gets the earnest money. Because at that point in time, you can request, there's no guarantee you're getting it.
Yeah, true. But it's
So,
also the reason why, Stephanie, you call on the front end as a listing agent
Absolutely.
for
yep,
these reasons, correct?
Absolutely. And I've had buyers in situations where they have backed out after that amount of time. And in both instances, I would say within the past maybe two and the past 5, 6 years, they've lost their earnest money.
Yeah,
It's been
yeah,
forfeited, and they were aware of it. I mean, they weren't upset. They understood that it
yeah.
was on them and they were going to lose it.
again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, you guys. Back to the original expectations when we sit down, when we schedule the inspection, when we put it the earnest money. I mean, all of these things are talked about day one.
Yeah.
And whether or not I have to remind them of that during the inspection period or not, which I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm no different than we're talking timelines. We're also talking what's going to happen after the inspection period with your earnest money. So
Right.
it's not like it's new news at that point in time. We've had this conversation, and I'll say, and I'll reference day one. I'll go back and say, hey, do you remember when we talked about this earnest money? What was going to happen, when you needed to have it put down, and then what would happen if we go beyond that, in this case, Tracy, 7 days. So,
Yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, if your buyer wants to back out, whether you think it's the best house you've seen together or not, your job is to take their direction, write the
yep,
mutual release, ask them what they'd like to do with their earnest money deposit, set the expectation that it's probably not going to be met very warmly on the
yep,
receipt of this. But
yep,
at the end of the day, the contract, they violated the contract. They're beyond their inspection period. So if both parties do not sign the mutual release, whether your buyer is in the right or whether the seller is in the right, it doesn't matter. So
doesn't
if the
matter.
buyer wants the EMD and the seller says no, there's nothing we can do. It's a dispute over earnest money. In Michigan, that dispute will end up in small claims court if it's below, I think, $7,500.
Right.
So imagine all the ways that we can avoid problems if we just have really good conversations on the front end with people.
That's
Amen.
it, communication and sticking to the contract.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's many, we take many a call at the broker support level from agents just like all of you who find yourself in these situations. And there's really not a lot you can do. And, you try to set the goals up front. You follow the timelines, you be a good advice giver, but if your client wants to back out, there's nothing you can do. You have to do it. And the earnest money will be up for grabs and could end up in small claims court. Sometimes people will want to split it. The seller's like, look, I took my house off the market for 10 days. You understand. We all get it, but at the end of the day, follow the contract, be the good advice giver. So
And
let's
get,
see what's
yeah, I
that?
was just gonna say, and get serious about the EMD because again, the calls that I get around earnest money deposits are kind of like, well, no different than I gave it. I can take it back, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
But so many
exactly.
people don't see that. And I think they kind of take a little bit more of a nonchalant attitude towards that earnest money where it's to your point, Tracy, it's part of the contract. It's
Yeah.
in the contract, folks. So that's
Yep.
how I have to explain it up front.
Yep. It's just negotiations from beginning to end. Each party wants to feel like they're winning a little bit. So,
Yeah.
um, somebody just wrote that they love the Earnest app, which I do too. Earnest is built in inside of Dotloop. There is a separate app, but we have it through Dotloop where you can just access it at the top of your screen when you're inside of Dotloop. It makes it really easy to move the money. When you log in to do it, you get a nice little receipt. It does take a couple of days for the money to move, though. Even though we get this receipt right away, it does take a few days for the money to move. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think that we have a good discussion on earnest money and what happens when a buyer wants to back out after inspections. What about all of you? Anyone have any questions while we're gathering here today? I think Scott St. Pierre has left. I don't see him. So sorry I missed his question.
Hmm.
Don't be shy.
Hmm.
Hi, Sierra. I see we have a new gal. She just joined us on Friday. She's here. I see you here. I'm glad you joined us. But yeah, that's really it. If you have questions, don't ever hesitate to call the broker support team. You'll see Stephanie and myself and Doug, as well as Kim and Luigi and Don and Eric. They're all on the broker support team. We're here to help our agents win. When you have things that come up just like this, sometimes it's just nice to have somebody to talk through it together. So,
Yep.
anyways, if nobody else has a question, we'll see you next Monday for another issue of Power Sessions. Let's Who's on this next page? Let me see if
Oh,
Scott came back.
Rory's. Rory says thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great day and a good week. Toodles.
See ya.
Toodles. See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.